Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense and our hemp news segment. During the COVID pandemic, we are recording in our office at 2712 Northeast Sandy Boulevard. And so the studio is closed, but we are carrying on, as I'm sure you are, through this health and economic crisis. Our first story tonight deals with health incidences of the vaping-related lung illness EVALI, or e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury, are primarily concentrated to jurisdictions where adult use cannabis consumption is prohibited, according to data published in the Journal of the American Medical Association's network. These findings come as little surprise. In jurisdictions where cannabis is legally regulated, consumers gravitate toward the above-ground retail marketplace where they can access lab-tested products manufactured by licensed businesses. Just like alcohol prohibition gave rise to the illicit production of dangerous bathroom gin, marijuana prohibition provides bad actors, not licensed businesses, the opportunity to fulfill consumers' demand, sometimes with tragic results. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 3,000 people have sought hospitalization because of the illness associated with vaporizing these little cartridges, which peaked last September, and nearly 70 people died as a result of it. In November, the CDC publicly identified vitamin E acetate, a diluting agent sometimes present in counterfeit unregulated vape products, as a primary culprit in the outbreak. Writing on Monday in the Journal for the American Medical Association, the researchers affiliated with Indiana University reported that last year's sudden outbreak of these EVALI cases was not driven by either state-level differences or prevalence in e-cigarette use. Rather, they reported that cases, quote, were concentrated in states where consumers do not have legal access to recreational marijuana dispensaries. One possible inference from our results is that the presence of legal markets for marijuana has helped mitigate or may be a protective against EVALI, end quote. A previous analysis of EVALI prevalence in legal cannabis markets versus illegal markets drew a similar conclusion. The study's lead author said that the team's findings are, quote, consistent with the hypothesis that people have demand for marijuana products, and in states where they don't have access to them in this regulatory fashion, they end up purchasing somewhere else. This study, Association of State Marijuana Legalization Policies for Medical and Recreational Use with Vaping-Associated Lung Disease, appears in the Journal of the American Medical Association Network Open. An accompanying editorial, Marijuana Legislation and Electronic Cigarettes or Vaping Industry, also appears online at the Journal of the American Medical Association. So for our next story tonight, in recent days, numerous states have taken steps to ensure that state-licensed cannabis facilities are explicitly permitted to maintain operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. In several jurisdictions, lawmakers have designated these operations to be essential to the health and well-being of the patient community. In others, regulators have either relaxed protocols or moved forward with new emergency rules to facilitate expanded access, such as permitting patients to seek telemedicine appointments and allowing dispensaries to permit curbside pickup and home delivery. I am encouraged that lawmakers and regulators are moving expeditiously to take these common sense actions. The reality that a growing number of jurisdictions have taken these important steps is further evidence of the degree to which above-ground cannabis access is now widely recognized to be an essential part of the fabric of our society and is regarded as being crucial to patients' health and welfare. We're happy to see that. If you're interested in a physician's referral for a medical marijuana permit anywhere in Oregon, Washington, or the rest of the United States, call us. We have a referral service. You can call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Our next story is out of Washington, D.C. Representatives from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, have recently provided a report to members of Congress with respect to the safety and marketing of commercially available CBD products. The report reiterates the agency's long-standing position that the majority of commercially available CBD-infused products are marketed in a manner that's inconsistent with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Specifically, the agency states, quote, "It's not currently lawful to add CBD to human or animal food, and CBD products cannot be lawfully sold as dietary supplements," end quote. The FDA additionally states that CBD-infused vape products, quote, "cannot be marketed without FDA-approved drug applications," end quote. It issued a similar guidance for CBD-branded cosmetics and topical products that are, quote, "intended to affect the structure or function of the body or that are intended for therapeutic use," end quote. The FDA acknowledged that many commercially available products are of variable quality and potency and may contain contaminants or elevated levels of heavy metals. The FDA stated, quote, "FDA intends to continue monitoring the marketplace and to initiate and expand appropriate compliance and enforcement actions against unlawful CBD products that pose the greatest risk of harm to the public," end quote. The FDA said that it is continuing to evaluate safety information regarding CBD consumption. Specifically, it is, quote, "actively evaluating what and how much data would be sufficient to support a conclusion that CBD can be safely allowed in dietary supplements under certain conditions," end quote. The FDA acknowledged that CBD products could ultimately be permitted to be marketed in such a manner, but that allowing such activities would require explicit changes to the agency's current rules. The report concluded, quote, "The FDA recognized the high level of interest in dietary supplements as potential pathways for products containing CBD, and we're actively evaluating potential rulemaking to allow CBD in dietary supplements," end quote. The agency added, however, that doing so would present, quote, "certain challenges," end quote, including potentially discouraging clinical investigations of the cannabinoid by drug development companies. In 2018, Congress enacted explicit language amending the U.S. Controlled Substances Act so that hemp plants containing no more than 0.3% THC or cannabinoids extracted from said plants are no longer federally prohibited by the Controlled Substances Act. The full text of the Food and Drug Administration's report is available online. Our next story is out of Utah. Utah's Republican Governor Gary Herbert signed legislation into law, House Bill 425, expediting medical cannabis access to certain patients with a doctor's authorization. Under the new law, which took immediate effect, patients who possess a written authorization from their physician may legally access medical cannabis products from a licensed provider without further delay in the state of Utah. The rule change permits patients who possess a valid recommendation but are still in the process of waiting for a state-issued registration card to have immediate access to cannabis. To date, Utah's regulators have issued just over 1,000 identification cards to qualifying patients. Separate provisions in the bill establish, quote, "a legal dosage limit," end quote, for medical cannabis products that shall not exceed 20 grams of THC per single dose. The language further mandates that a patient's 30-day supply of unprocessed cannabis should not exceed 113 grams by weight. Utah's first medical cannabis provider began operations early last month. The law allows for a total of 14 retail providers across the state of Utah. Next story is out of West Virginia. Republican Governor Jim Justice has signed legislation into law expanding the types of cannabis preparations that will soon be available to qualified medical cannabis patients. West Virginia's Senate Bill 339, which took effect upon its passage, expands West Virginia's definition of acceptable, quote, forms of medical cannabis to include dry leaf and plant form, end quote. As initially enacted, West Virginia's medical cannabis access law limited marijuana formulations to include only infused pills, oils, creams, liquid, dermal patches, or preparations, quote, in a form medically appropriate for administration by vaporization or nebulization, end quote. Though initially enacted by lawmakers in 2017, West Virginia's Cannabis Access Program is not yet fully operational. Next story has to do with High Times Magazine. The High Times Magazine announced that it's temporarily suspended the publication of 2 of its print magazines due to complications related to the supply chain and delivery services as a result of coronavirus. Seattle-based Dope Magazine and Culture Magazine, acquired by High Times over the past 3 years, will no longer circulate as staff members and freelancers have been laid off. High Times Magazine's also let go of most of its own publishing staff based in New York. High Times Magazine, which has been publishing since 1974, has already released its April 2020 edition, although many questions remain about future editions, with or without a pandemic raging through the country. Rumors of bankruptcy and mishandling of investment funds have been rampant since the company, under Levine, scheduled the sale of its shares in preparation for an initial public offering, or IPO, which has yet to materialize. Unfortunately, High Times' plans to go public has been rocky as the company has accumulated a deficit of $105 million at the end of 2019. In late March, High Times Magazine Holding announced it was moving into cannabis cultivation and processing with the acquisition of California-based Humboldt Heritage and its subsidiary Humboldt Sun Growers Guild and Grateful 8. High Times also announced recently that it would be launching 2 flagship dispensaries in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Marijuana legalization has been pushed to the back burner again in New York. The issue fails to make it to the New York State budget for 2020 as Governor Andrew Cuomo and state officials grapple with the coronavirus pandemic. In a press briefing, Cuomo was asked if legalizing recreational marijuana would be part of the New York State budget this year. He replied, quote, "It's not likely, too much to do, too little time," end quote. Cuomo made his comments during his daily briefing on the coronavirus as the budget deadline approached. New York has a $15 billion budget gap caused by the fallout from coronavirus, where New York City is the nation's epicenter. The Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act in New York was introduced by a longtime advocate for drug policy reform, who said recently that it was not realistic that Governor Cuomo and the state legislature could negotiate a complicated measure like legal marijuana in the budget amid all the distraction caused by the coronavirus. New York State has the highest number of positive COVID-19 cases in the country. More than half of the positive cases and nearly 80% of the deaths are concentrated in New York City. While news of legalization being pushed to the back burner again in the nation's largest city, many advocates say that it's understandable. One advocate said, quote, "Not moving to legalize cannabis through the budget process right now, it makes sense," end quote. But in nearby Massachusetts, what doesn't make sense is why Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, a Republican, extended the temporary closure of the state's recreational marijuana shops. Governor Baker told reporters that allowing dispensaries to reopen could exacerbate the coronavirus crisis by attracting visitors from neighboring states where cannabis is still illegal. Negative effect of the ruling: one Massachusetts mother, 2 young children, Shannon Venezia, has not had epilepsy-related seizure in over 4 years as a result of using cannabis instead of prescription drugs. She told NBC News in her state that she didn't know what she was going to do if the order to keep dispensaries closed stays in place. Venezia asked, quote, "Am I going to have to go back to the black market, or am I going to have to go get my medical marijuana card renewed?" End quote. Massachusetts is the only state out of 11 that have legalized recreational cannabis to deem that cannabis dispensaries are not essential businesses. Massachusetts legalized adult use cannabis nearly 4 years ago, and it became available in 2018. And our last story tonight deals with people in our prisons, especially those there for marijuana. The U.S., which has the highest incarceration rate of any nation in the world, is currently holding roughly 2.3 million people behind bars in the country's disparate system of confinement that includes thousands of jails, state, federal prisons, and private prisons. Even with legalization today in a dozen states, marijuana prisoners, which I think are the victims of marijuana prohibition, are calling for the release or clemency for people incarcerated for cannabis offenses, as well as a reduction of incarcerated nonviolent prisoners, whether they've been sentenced or not. Public health experts have warned that the coronavirus poses a threat not only to inmates but to prison staff, their families, and communities. Prison overcrowding, cramped and unsanitary conditions will inevitably enable the coronavirus to spread. In fact, it already has. Jails are seeing a spike in confirmed COVID-19 cases as public health and correction officials issue dire warnings. Cities and towns in a variety of states, including Baltimore, Massachusetts, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, New Jersey, Los Angeles, and New York City, have begun to release inmates incarcerated for nonviolent drug-related offenses. The Federal Bureau of Prisons recently imposed a 14-day quarantine. There's no justification for arresting and jailing individuals for marijuana offenses during this crisis. It's the best interest of law enforcement and the greater population to cease marijuana arrests and reduce arrests for nonviolent crimes. It's also vital for individuals who are incarcerated for cannabis offenses to be released or granted clemency in order to prevent a potentially disastrous and deathly situation. One of the longest held cannabis prisoners in the United States is John Knock, a nonviolent first-time offender who's been serving 2 life sentences without parole since 1996 for conspiracy to distribute cannabis. He's 72 years old and has been in prison for over 24 years so far. Knock, who never plea bargained nor turned state's evidence, was convicted on a conspiracy charge where no marijuana was actually found. With the real fear of coronavirus so prevalent among the elderly, particularly elderly inmates, I hope the judge will grant a clemency and send Mr. Knock home. We all hope that Knock and thousands of nonviolent prisoners behind bars around the country are released during this crisis. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight, and we have more video from past shows. Thanks for watching and help us restore hemp.
Welcome everybody to the Ready, Set, Grow breakout session here. It gives me great pleasure to have put this thing together, and I don't think even just a couple of years ago this would even be a possibility. To have people speaking about growing for patients, the right ways to do it, the safest ways to do it, and people that are willing to come out and talk about that, and how they're able to do that, legally and the proper way. So, without further ado, let me introduce the panel here. Directly to my left, Ms. Jill from TGA Genetics. TGA Seeds is Team Green Avenger, combination of Subcool and Ms. Jill and Dioxide, a bunch of other guys and gals that are helping out for the medical patients. They're seed breeders, they're growers, and they really do it the right way. They're responsible for some really amazing strains like Vortex, Jilly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Danny Boy, and the list really goes on and on. They're even in my C-Bank Hall of Fame, which I put together, so yeah, and it's really quite an honor that they're here, and just want to introduce them. Subcool is also the author of Dank, which is an amazing book inside the mind of a breeder and what choices they make to create the strains that they make, and beautiful pictures as well. Okay, we got Rafael Martinez, Jr., who is a patient caregiver for the state of Oregon and a major player with Oregon Normal, and a great dude. I'm psyched he's here. That's Rafael, or Jr. And then Igor Rakuz, an old friend of mine. He's taking the place of Kyle Cushman, who actually sadly could not make it up here for this seminar, but he is taking the place. He's with Safe Harbor of Maine, which is one of the first dispensaries on the East Coast in Maine. They only allowed 8 dispensaries for the whole state, and I think it's one per resident. No, I'm just kidding. It's 1 per county. It's 1 per county, and they already have the caregivers. They've had the medical law since '99. They have a grow your own, they have a caregiver system, and now they're going to have dispensaries. Even some of them, I think, will be able to deliver the medicine to patients in their homes, which is really exciting for us on the East Coast. And Maine's really leading the way. It's like the California of our side of the country. And so that's Igor. And to his left, Jeremy Miller. Jeremy is not only the founder of Olympia Hemp Fest in Washington, he's also a great grower and the breeder of Seeds of Truth, which is his medical marijuana seed outfit. So, I've never been to Ollie Hemp Fest, but I hear it's a great time, and I'm looking forward to hopefully coming this next year. So, welcome, Jeremy. Let's get right to it. We only have a little under a couple hours or whatever, so I want to get as much as we can out of everybody. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. You know, germinating seeds is really how you embark upon this pursuit, you know, because you can always buy clones from the dispensary, and that's a good way also to get started sometimes, but you could come with a lot of problems, and it depends on who you get them from. A lot of them can be susceptible to powdery mildew or already have pests on them. And, you know, a lot of times they're just not, they don't have the vigor that you get when you pop seeds. And so I think I'm going to talk to Subcool right now, let him tell us about germinating seeds.
Thank you, Danny. There's millions of ways to start seeds. We see a lot of seeds start. We have 20 strains, we're worldwide distribution. I see everything you can possibly see with seeds. And the first thing I would say is that people try to do too much to them. My favorite picture is we sort seeds out back, and underneath my barbecue grill in Oregon, when it's 40 degrees in granite, seeds will germinate, okay? So it doesn't take anything to germinate seeds. A lot of times people will send me an email that says, hey, I got your seeds, they didn't germinate. I put them on a heat mat, I used this and that, 3 drops of this. You know, nature didn't really need all that. We are big fans of a product called Rapid Rooters. I don't know what company makes them. They're a small cork plug. We flip them upside down, we stick the seed in, and they germinate. I mean, that's really what it's about. I really try to suggest that people not use a lot of chemicals and products in order to aid germination, because it simply is not required. That's really how I germinate seeds and have for a long time. One more small point. A lot of people like to put them in paper towel, plastic bag, Ziploc bag. That's fine, but if you don't have a light touch as you're transferring the seeds from the plastic bag and the paper towel, you can tear the seeds up. You know, you can smash them or nick them with your tweezers. So I don't think that's always the best way if you're a big clumsy guy like me and your hands aren't real delicate. So, you know, don't try to be starting moving seeds around while you've got resin all over them and stuff, because you'll kill your seeds.
All right, and Raphael, do you have any seed germination tips or anything?
I kind of have the same theory as Sub. I don't really believe in using a lot of chemicals when you do it. I'm the old clumsy hands. I still use the seed bag, you know, and the paper towel. But I'm old school, you know. The guy I learned from is older than dirt, you know, my dad. So he's taught me quite a few things that I've learned. And he's a seed person with in the paper towel.
Paper towel. That's
yeah, but no,
most common
just
way.
water. Just
yep,
water.
that's the most common way.
That's pretty much me.
All right, and so what's the importance of growing from seeds, and explain what a mother plant is to people too. I mean, you don't always have to grow from a seed only to like just flower that plant and move on. You can keep those genetics, and that's.
I try to go fast because I ramble. I try to stick to the point here. I covered this down in Colorado, and everybody's very interested in it. The problem with clones are threefold. Number one is mislabeling. I love it when someone walks up and hands me a bud and they tell me it's California orange. Well, I've been growing California orange for 3 decades and I know what it tastes like. So the clones are very mislabeled, and that can be a problem if you're trying to make tinctures or medibles. Number 2 is mildew, but you cannot see mildew. My partner out there just got a bunch of nice clones. Hell OG cut. These are cuts that people drool and salivate over, and And what happened was, even with good treatment and amazing methodology, he got a little spot of powdery mildew, and then he spent the next 6 months getting rid of it. So if you take clones in thinking that you're going to save time, it's a very good possibility that you're going to bring something into your grow room. The main thing that we all are scared of, mites. Mites are part of growing cannabis indoors and out. If you have a good climate in your grow room, keep it 74 degrees all the time, don't let your temperature swing, you can keep the mites down. But if you bring, say, Romulan cutting into your house a year ago because it is an amazing strain and you really needed it to make a strain, and then you battle mites for a fucking year, you know, that's what you're opening yourself up to. When you start with seed, you don't have to worry about mites or mildew or mold coming into your grow room. As a grower, from a 10-pack of good seeds, you should be able to select 3 to 4 nice females, discarding the females that are not nice or not what you want, and select a mother plant that you want. Now, this is how we do it quickly. We grow the plant at day 45. We know that what the sex of the plant is. She takes clones. She has nice, delicate hands. Then we bud the plant out. We smoke the plant. We share the plant with our patients. We're very lucky here in Oregon that we just give our pot to our patients. We don't charge for it. So we give pot away to everybody. You know, we don't care. We've been finding people to get joints here. There's like 8 joints in the ashtray that not enough people smoking them because they're not used to being here in Oregon, I don't guess. But okay, so then we bud these plants out. She uses numbers. I like to use cool names. This is Shaggy. This is one of our new Space Queens, Cheese Quits. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is on the cover of a magazine right now. We planted 5 seeds. One of the seeds, hermaphrodite, right at 5 weeks. It was easy to get out of there. People don't want to talk about this, but the dominant state of cannabis is hermaphroditism. So as a grower, you just got to get rid of that. Then we had 2 other ones. One was cheese dominant, one was purple dominant. We selected this pheno, which I named Shaggy because I like cartoons. And it's freaking awesome. I mean, it tastes like grapes, and it tastes like cheese, and it yielded 3.5 ounces from dirt, from one single seed grown in soil. And this is a special phenotype that we won't get rid of, right? It's got an amazing high, and we found this. You can't do that if you don't start the seeds, though. What I've done my entire life, and I urge you to do this if you guys are out there growing medicinally, start seeds, man. It's like a box of Cracker Jacks. And I'm a seed guy, right? But I'm not saying buy my seeds, okay? There's plenty of breeders out there, right? I mean, we grow other people's seeds all the time looking for something. I grew DJ Short's blueberry. I didn't find what I wanted. I grew this kid from the UK seeds called Pine Queen. This kid's name was Sonic. Something called Shimla times something else. Oh my God, it was like the 3rd best pot I've smoked in my life. And so you can't find these things if you don't start the seed. So I'm sorry that's so long.
Yeah, absolutely. And from those seeds, you can get a good mother plant, and from the mother plant, you can get an infinite amount of clones. I mean, I wouldn't call it infinite, but
I'd like to cover one more small thing here. A lot of people don't understand cloning, and I really feel it important to address this. You don't have to keep a mother plant. And here in Oregon, where we can grow 6 plants for each one of our patients, I can't have a room full of 5-foot pot plants. I just can't. We take clones just before we bud. So I have 12 strains in my grow room. I take 24 clones, the pretty nice clone that roosts the fastest we keep. Jack's Cleaner, I don't know how many people have heard of Jack's Cleaner. It's the father of Jack the Ripper. It has been cloned for 2 decades. I mean, I've been to prison, so while I was in prison, other people kept cloning it, then it came back to me. The plant is exactly the same, and this is what I want to explain. I think the word clone is wrong. It's not, we're not making a copy of something. It is the plant. We're taking a living piece of the plant, a living piece of DNA, and then it's just growing again. I'm not going to stop calling them clones, but you're not replicating something. So the theory of copy versus a copy versus a copy, it's false. Yeah, you're right. You want healthy growth, you want really healthy growth, really good point, you can't use a sick clone. But I would imagine most of us growing here are not using big mother rooms, right?
well, yeah, no, it's great. And how about Jeremy? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the situation in Washington, and also if you have any tips on germinating seeds, cloning, or mother plants?
I'm very simplistic in the way I germinate seeds, so I think the way that Subcool said was very adequate. You definitely, seeds have a vigor that clones don't have. So I mean, if you're starting from seed, they take right off really vigorously. So if you're starting them in water, a rapid rooter like Sub had suggested, you'll see those things just sprout right out and just take off like very vigorously, because the seeds have just a vigorous hybrid growth that the clones don't. After a certain time, they start to lose a little bit. They're still great plants, but you won't see them quite as vigorous as the seed strains, in my opinion. Washington State itself is a little bit different. It's unique. We're able to grow 15 plants. We're only able to caregive for one patient. So, and the problem that we see with that is Washington State, possession is 9/10 of the law. So if I'm caregiving for another patient, then technically I'm in possession of 30 plants. So even though the law allows me to grow for another patient, I still am fighting it in court. I have to prove that I wasn't technically in possession. I was growing these for somebody else, and I wasn't consuming that medicine on my own behalf. So it's kind of strange dynamics. They're working on a dispensary law next year. Senator Cole Wells is working on a dispensary law in Washington State. There's a lot of aspects to this proposed legislation that really worry me. I'm asking a lot of people to kind of take a look at what's going on, and this is our chance to really define what's going to happen here in the future in Washington. And I think that the legislators don't take into account what the stakeholders and the patients, really feel a lot of times. They just make time for the big lobbyists or the people that have money. And I think right in the next few years we're going to see a lot of interesting dynamics in Washington State for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it's turning around very quickly, and people are getting more involved.
Yeah, right now there's a lot of patient co-ops that are operating in Washington State. There's a lot that's popped up in Seattle, the Spokane area. I actually run one in Tacoma area called Sacred Plant Medicine. That's where we do all the breeding and everything for seeds of true genetics. And,
cool. Now what about, we were talking about the importance of seeds and vigor. What about germination? What's any tips that you might have about that?
I'm a very simplistic germinator too. I'll go either with a paper towel, old school style, or I'll start them right in the rapid roots. Those are definitely my two ways that I'll do it. Mostly I'll do it the old school paper towel way, because half the time I don't have the rapid root right there in front of me.
And what about cloning? Do you do a lot of cloning, or mostly?
We do a lot of cloning of the strains that we have to keep them perpetuated, but we definitely love these seeds. They have a vigor that clones just don't have, and they come like a subset disease-free. So.
All right. Well, as subset also, Jill takes the clones for them, or the cuttings, rooted cuttings, however you would want to refer. So maybe you can give us a couple of just step-by-step of how you go about creating clones.
Well, it's important that we start out with clean utensils. We have sharp razor blades and scissors that we use to take the cuttings. And we take them at a 45-degree angle.
Check.
And we dip these in rooting hormone. You can use gel, powder, or liquid, and we prefer the liquid. And I like to take the soft cuttings and usually off towards the bottom. They need to be healthy, nice green coloring. And I like to make sure that there is a root bump that will be going into the cube, so that I feel that that's a better way to root the plant. And we like to put those immediately under fluorescent lights. We put them in, we use a shoebox, plastic shoebox. You can buy them at the Dollar Tree. And we take two sides and we invert them. We take the lids off and throw them away. We just take two big sides and turn them inside together. We stick them under the light. We keep the clones very damp. We keep them, warm. We don't want them to get too hot. We keep them about 78 degrees is a good temperature. And in about 3 to 7 days, we have roots.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. The importance being on the humidity and the warmth.
And consistency.
And consistency. But if you need to, if it's cold and you're doing a cloning, get a cheap little heat mat that you plug in and put that underneath the tray. It's really important that the roots in that area and the water that they sit in or whatever it is never get too cold.
This is going to sound silly, okay, but I answer a lot of questions. And the main thing that I ask everybody that have a problem with clones is, do you own a thermometer? And I say, what's the temperature? Oh, it's about, no, you have to have a thermometer. A phalangometer is not a way to tell the temperature. And it sounds silly telling you guys this, but I can't tell you the number of people that have had problems for a month cloning. I'm trying to coach them through it. They go to Radio Shack and all of a sudden they've got clones. So you got to have a thermometer and a humidistat to find out what the temperature in the humidistat is. Don't just say, well, they're kind of warm. So that's not good.
All right, Igor, you got any cloning tips?
Well, the rapid rooter system.
Rapid rooters. Everybody seems to be a fan of that. Do you pre-moisten them, or?
I like them because they're actually inoculated in a lot of beneficial bacteria, so it's not going to get pollinated with stuff that's going to hurt your plant.
That's not being...
Yeah, closer to the mic. He said that
Yeah, there you go. All right. So yeah, what I said was the sponges are inoculated with bacteria. They actually also have a little bit of a mineral charge too to help the plant move forward. There's other products on the market as well, such as Easy Roots, that cost a little bit less, and it's really similar. It's also pH plugged, so if your nutrient solution isn't exactly right on, it'll balance itself out. It also makes sure that none of that the medium, you can't oversaturate it. You can pour tons of water on it, and if the surrounding surface will float, it'll just lift itself up off the water and balance itself out.
I would do a commercial for rapid rooters. They rock. I mean, they're so much nicer than anything we ever had.
And we would also probably all agree to try to discourage the use of rock wool in that process. I mean, plants do root well in rock wool because it's able to hold air and allow oxygen to the roots and stuff, but it's a really kind of a toxic product. Not kind of, but it's a toxic product. It's not good for you to be around it, and it's not good for you to throw it out. And so rapid rooters or easy roots or any kind of organic alternative you can find are much better. And the truth is, you can just get the little cups and fill them with soil and keep it moist and warm, and the plant will root in that as well. The moisture level and the warm temperature are what's important to get the roots to pop. And once they pop, now you're in the vegetative stage.
I want to tell y'all a little bit about a plant I know that can save the world. It grows long and tall and has flowers that can make your mind swirl. It's a funky plant with a fiber that is resistant to rain and mold. It's the strongest plant fiber known to man, the best rope you'll ever hold. Well, the pioneers covered up the wagon trains with a canvas made of hemp. And Washington and Jefferson grew it on their farms and said to make the most of it. First stars and stripes were sewn on hemp, the first constitution too. This is around the world for food, fiber, oil, medicine, and fuel. And if we press the seeds, we won't have no need for any other oil. We can make paints and inks, or run our car, we'll go back next season, it'll fix the soil. The most nutritious seed we can put in our mouth with omega-6 and 3. We can feed the world with the tree of life and live sustainably. But if we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to breathe. Grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plan, growing wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa.
say you smoke it and you feel fantastic, but from hemp you can make an alternative to plastic, made from plants, not petroleum, you see, so it won't still be around in 4003. It can biodegrade, which means there'll be less pollution. Just another reason for a hemp revolution.
The flowers of the female hemp plant make the best medicines on earth. Helps cancer and AIDS patients eat their food. Helps those with depression overcome the blues. Glaucoma, epilepsy, nausea, insomnia, stress, neurosis, psychosis, pain, PMS. All the studies have been done and all the doctors agree, but they can't make money off this plant, you see, because it's free. It grows from a seed, wild and free like we ought to be. You know the future is grown in our own backyards. If we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We'll grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plan, going wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa.
In the mid-1930s, it was the billion-dollar crop. With the invention of the recorder, they could produce it non-stop. But then a smear campaign with Mexicans to blame started making people thinking to make your brain go pop. Yeah, since then it's never stopped. It ain't like getting high for paint and crack rock. Time to bring it back to nature, time to bring back some life. Let the farmers do their job, stop giving them strife. Renewable resources, life-giving forces. Panels for your cars and saddles for your horses. DuPont, Monsanto, making the wrong choices. Suicide genes, extinguishing our voices. Cutting down the trees, polluting the 7 seas. Leaving the fate of the planet to the corporate entities. Corrupt politics, warfare, disease. Now it's time to make a change. It's time to plant seeds.
Pepper so nutritious, you the oil seeds. It gives you all the protein you will ever need. You can make it in a sandwich with jelly or jam, or make it in a soap or a lotion for your hands. You can make it into fuel, put it right in our cars, then we won't need the oil and won't have to start wars. You can make it into paper, right as much as you please, cause it grows like a weed and we won't have to cut trees. So put your faith in hemp, such a versatile plant, and don't let the government tell us we can't, cause hemp can help us all in so many ways, and it doesn't mean that we will all be living in a daze. Versatility, sustainability, look at history, it ain't no mystery, hemp for victory.
If we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the wicked God's plan, growing wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa. So in this modern day and age, when we seem to lack spirituality, this one single plant can bring us back almost 10,000 years in history. To the Shiva, Puranas, the Jesus, the Christ, to the Buddha, the pagans, the goddess, the light, to commune with all the animals, to go with all the trees, to realize the gotta seek is inside me. As the earth is the mother, we gotta take care of the earth, cause the earth is the mother that gives life birth. And we can heal all our relations with a single green plant, and we can start right now.
We got to legalize, we're gonna come alive, all the people who know what's up, gonna say what the heck we letting these suckers get away with it for. Come on and open the door, are you with me, are you with me? It's gonna take more than hippies to shut the suckers down. We're not fooling around, but they're keeping us divided, opposite-sided. What do we Americans do? We keep buying it, black and white, they're making us fight and still in the same races. Hatred justifies violence, when nature's gotta wake up to see the real enemy is the powers that be from the opposition. See, wake up now to nature's creation, sacred herb can unite the nations. Gotta legalize the herb of adoration. All of this use is gonna heal the nation. Heal the nation. Heal the nation. Gonna heal the nation. Gonna
I first smoked pot 45 years ago when I was a freshman at Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C., and I've been a regular smoker ever since. There is nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana. It was 40 years ago next month that NORML was formed, and at the time, and so we've been at this now for 4 decades, and our position then and our position now is there's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults, and it should be of no interest or concern to the government. They have no business knowing whether we smoke or why we smoke. As Alan mentioned in his opening comments, we really are at a tipping point in this country. There are more living Americans who have smoked marijuana than living Americans who have not. And with the increasing support we have from the public now, we've made more political progress in the last 5 years than in the first 35. So, folks, we are very close to winning this, closer than it looks like when you're out struggling on the street level, I understand. But once change begins, it happens more quickly than you anticipate. Now, I want to introduce you now to some of the people who are responsible for the progress we're making. I don't for a moment suggest that these are the only important projects around the country, because frankly, there are so many of those we couldn't possibly have everyone represented on the panel, or we wouldn't have time during the 3-day weekend. But this is a fair sample, I think, of the very good, positive, progressive work that's going on this issue. The first person I'd like to introduce is, because we're here in his home state. John Sajo is the executive director of a group called Voter Power. They are the primary sponsor of Initiative 74, I believe it is that right, John, 74, in Oregon, which would create a state-licensed dispensary system where right now in Oregon, as he'll explain, I'm sure, they have medical marijuana and you can share it among your friends and give it away, but nobody is legally allowed to sell it. Well, with some luck in November, that's going to change. Please welcome John Sajo.
Thanks, Keith, and welcome all you NORML attendees. If there's any of you that are my age or a little older, you might remember the last time NORML had the annual conference in Portland was 1986. And back then, we also had a measure on the ballot to legalize personal use of marijuana. I was the main person on that, and we've come a long way. That year, we got 26.3% yes vote, and it was a real sobering lesson. And so it's exciting to be with you all here now when we are on the verge of not only being on the ballot, but winning the election. So this is an exciting time. I assume you're all here because you love marijuana and you would like to legalize it. Good. Well, let me tell you, when I started out as a young activist many decades ago, I looked at it and, tried to figure out, well, how do we do that? Is it going to be, do we go to our legislatures? Do we go to Congress? Do we, bring court cases where the laws are thrown out? And I quickly realized that the way we're going to legalize marijuana is using the initiative process. And that has been how most of the major gains have happened. That's how we got, Prop 215 in California brought us the first medical marijuana law. Now we have 14 states plus D.C., and most of them came with initiatives. So we need to embrace the initiative process. The people are far ahead of the politicians on this issue, and that's how we're going to legalize marijuana. And this is an exciting year. I'm not 100% sure, but I think we have marijuana on the ballot in 4 states, and I think that's the most we've ever had on in one time. So that's another measure of progress. Now I'm just going to try to share some things I've learned over the years about using the initiative process and what we need to know about it. First off, it costs a lot of money. And up until recently, most of the initiatives were not funded by us. They weren't funded by, a grassroots movement. They were funded by a small number of big funders, Peter Lewis, Soros, and Sperling. And thank God for those, really wise, rich men. But it's time for this movement to move past that funding source. And frankly, we're having to do it whether we like it or not. We got on the ballot by doing it ourselves, and we did get a grant from MPP and a grant from DPA, but in this initiative that we just put on the ballot, we raised the lion's share of the money from small contributions and a few benefactors. And one of my messages is that if we want to legalize marijuana, we're going to have to pay for it, and it's not going to be cheap. And I'm hoping that we can go away from this conference with everybody realizing that we have the power, just those of us at this conference, to do this, but we need to shift our spending a little bit, and we need to all make sure we spend as much on legalization as we spend, for example, at the Governor Hotel. And if we do that, we'll be pretty close to legalizing marijuana. So anyway, part of my pitch to you all is we need your help. You know, one of the things that's going on with this initiative is we barely got on the ballot, we're nearly broke, and we're in a very, very difficult, tough campaign. We think we can win, and there's lots of evidence that shows we can, but we need you to help us raise some money. So we're having an after party tonight at the Modish building, which is about 3 blocks from here. We're passing out flyers, so come on down, and, you know, we'll be continuing the conference after it stops here and have speakers and things you can bid on and all that usual stuff. But anyway, we need your help, so please step up. Now, what does our initiative do? Our initiative, you know, we've had the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act for 12 years, and it's a great law. It has stopped patients from being arrested for using their medicine. What it hasn't done is created a system where all patients get medicine and they get it conveniently. We now have over 45,000 patients in Oregon. I don't know if that's the highest per capita among the states, but it's right up there. But we have a system that requires these people to produce their own medicine, and it's a felony for anybody to sell it to them. And we've been struggling with that for 12 years, making the best of it, and we do pretty good. You know, there's a lot of organizations that try to help patients, but it just doesn't work. You know, there's no question that requiring patients to produce their own medicine keeps medical marijuana in the dark ages. And we look forward to a future where patients can grow it themselves if they want, but where they can go buy it and where they can buy advanced products that research and development and innovators like some of you out there are going to come up with. And that's going to be a better world, and we're going to make it happen on November 2nd. There's some really exciting aspects of this campaign. Now, we've done a lot of polling, and, you know, one of the things I got to say is that part of politics is our issue, but a bigger part of politics is realizing that we're a little issue in a big sea. And right now, one of the things we're up against is the decline of the Democratic Party in the national sphere, and the Republicans are highly motivated. They're out for blood, and they're all going to be voting. We polled on our issue right after the November 2008 election, and we were polling at 59-32. We polled in June, and we're only ahead 46-41. And it's not because people have changed their attitudes about medical marijuana. It's because young Democrats are not planning on voting. And so one lesson there is the key to us winning this election, and I imagine it's the key to Prop 19 winning in California, is we have to mobilize the young voters. We have to register them, and we have to get out the vote. So we're directing a lot of effort in our campaign at that. We have petitioners out collecting emails and registering voters. We just collected emails from about 5,000 people at the state fair, and now we have an email list approaching 20,000, and we're going to keep building on that to where we can send out emails and remind people to vote. In Oregon, we are lucky because we have only vote by mail. We don't go to the polls at all, so we have about a 2-week window where people have their ballots, and we're going to spend a lot of our resources on getting people that we know are supporters out to vote. And if we do that, that will easily overcome the fact that we're not over 50% in our polling numbers. There's been another test of this campaign as well. Last month, a new part of the initiative process here in Oregon was called the Citizens Initiative Review, where another nonprofit organization partnering with the state government selected 24 voters at random to demographically match the state of Oregon, and those folks studied this initiative for a solid week. We had many hours of testimony. They had expert witnesses. We brought out all kinds of people. We brought Mary Lynn Mathry from Patients Out of Time and Mike Kravitz from Veterans for Access to Medical Marijuana. We brought Don Duncan from ASA. You know, the other side, they talked to Andrea Barthwell. They talked to Chris's police chief, who said all kinds of terrible things about dispensaries in California. But at the end of that process, where these 24 average citizens got to really get into the trenches and study the details of the initiative, we won 13-11. And the lesson for that is that we can win, but it's going to be very close. And that's really what we're up against in this race. And we're putting the best campaign forward we can. We got some good things going for us. Oregon has a voters pamphlet that you can buy pro and con arguments in. It gets mailed to every household. We have an outstanding lineup in our voters pamphlet. We have 11 arguments in, including one from Tom Potter, the former mayor and police chief of Portland, Betty Roberts, former justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, Christine Olson, former U.S. Attorney for Oregon. So our goal was to have some law enforcement people on our side, and I think we did pretty good there. We have 8 other arguments from doctors and patients. The other side has only 2, one from Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana and another from the cops. So I think we're going to win in that arena. That's going to be very influential. We hope to raise a significant amount of money over the next 2 months and use it to get out the vote on the one hand, and also to put out our message that a regulated system will work better than what we have now, and will make sure all patients get the medicine they need. And, wish us luck. Do what you can to help. I think we're going to win this election in November. Thank you very much.
Dragged off, or their houses or cars being confiscated for a joint of marijuana when there are 500,000 deaths a year from alcohol and nicotine. I mean, come on, let's get real here. So what I suggest you do is let's legalize it. We could do it if we got together. We could do anything.